Bienvenidos a VOX TERRA. Welcome back. Today I want to share with you an important article by Desmog that really shows us how we got to this climate crisis, or what I call the roots of the climate crisis. And this article is titled, "There is no doubt Exxon knew CO2 pollution was a global threat by the late 1970s. Now this article was published back in 2016, and everyone should know about it. And it says something about the nature of our media, education system, all of it, that we don't know this article. Now, when we're talking about global threat, they're talking about climate change, what is now called climate change. But when I was younger, when I was a little lad, I heard this phenomena referred to as the man-made greenhouse effect, meaning the burning of fossil fuels. You're adding primarily CO2 and now methane to the atmosphere, and these are known heat-trapping gases, and they elevate the natural greenhouse effect of our Earth. Hence, man-made greenhouse effect. A very straightforward name. A little explaining needed, but very straightforward. And the threat posed by this elevating heat is the changing of our weather patterns, the bringing in of the era of extreme weather. Now, back in 2016, Desmog unveiled the research it found from some reports, some corporate company reports that date back to the 1970s. These reports came from an Imperial Oil Archive, and Imperial Oil is a Canadian subsidiary of ExxonMobil. And this archive is housed in Alberta, Canada. Now, Alberta is a province in Canada that is heavy in oil and gas production, or fossil fuel production. Also, to my understanding, is punctuated by what is called conservative politics. And I say what is called because to me a lot of it isn't really conservative. It is the fossil fuel industry putting on a conservative cloak. And an area of Canada that is now being hit more and more by intense climate-driven wildfires. In these reports, when we listen to the excerpts today, you'll be hearing climate change, what's now called climate change, referred to as CO2 or carbon dioxide greenhouse effect, a name that explained the whole problem in the name, CO2 greenhouse effect, meaning industry is just adding too darn much CO2 to the atmosphere. So the first of these really telling excerpts, produced in 1980, a report called Review of Environmental Protection Activities for 1978 through 1979, stated, now listen to this, "It is assumed that the major contributors of CO2 are the burning of fossil fuels. There is no doubt," see, it's an Imperial report, so you got to read this in an Imperial accent, "there is no doubt that the increases in fossil fuel usage, and decreases of forest cover." Note, decreases of forest cover. Okay, so increases of fossil fuel usage and decreases of forest cover are aggravating the potential problem of increased CO2 in the atmosphere. And then it goes on to say the technology exists to, quote, "remove CO2 from the stack gases, but removal of only 50% of the CO2 would double the cost of power generation." So here already we see in the report concerns about the cost to Exxon. Now, just for the record, most environmentalists today are not supporting carbon capture or removal of the CO2 when you're burning. We are supporting just getting the heck away from burning fossil fuels and going towards renewable and just using less stuff. Now, coming to this issue of knowledge, and how do we define knowledge in the corporation? Well, here's how. A distribution list included with the report. So a distribution list of who got to see this report indicates that it was disseminated to managers across Exxon's international corporate offices, including Europe. So this distribution report shows the report was distributed all across Exxon. The next report in the series, Review of Environmental Protection Activities for 1980 through 1981. Noted in the appendix, key environmental affairs issues and concerns that CO2 greenhouse effect is receiving increased media attention. Okay, so listen to that again. CO2 greenhouse effect is receiving increased media attention. And that presumably would set a big uh-oh through Exxon. It's getting more media attention. Now what do we do? Well, what they did was they started funding denial industry to say, hey, CO2 isn't such a big deal, etc., etc. But before we get to that, a 1980 Exxon report explains that government funding will be sought to expand the use of Exxon tankers in determining the capacity of oceans to store CO2. And as you know from NASA, well, those oceans have stored a lot of the CO2, resulting in ocean acidification and the heating of our oceans. Well, I ask, is that heating of the oceans eventually they're going to hit their capacity, and then that's going to start releasing more heat into our atmosphere, creating yet another feedback loop? But now, really interestingly, all the way back to 1970, here's a report called Pollution is Everybody's Business, authored by H.R. Holland, a chemical engineer responsible for environmental protection in Imperial's Oil Engineering Division. And Holland wrote, and this is a company report, Holland wrote in 1970, says pollution means disaster to the affected species. The only satisfactory course of action is to prevent it. So the only satisfactory course of action to pollution is preventing pollution. That means don't burn so much fossil fuels. To maintain the addition of foreign matter at such levels that it can be diluted, assimilated, or destroyed by natural processes. To protect, and I'm quoting here, man's environment from man. And tellingly, Holland's report of the estimated global emissions lists one of the pollutants as carbon dioxide. And Holland cites two sources: oxidation of natural materials like plant and animal matter. However, keep in mind, even that now today is part of what I call those climate feedback loops initiated by fossil fuel burning. And the other one he lists is combustion. Combustion, the burning of fossil fuels. 1970, Exxon report or Imperial Oil report. And in his report, he had an asterisk or a double asterisk next to the CO2, where he cites to a 1969 study titled Carbon Dioxide Affects Global Ecology. Carbon dioxide affects global ecology. And that, according to DeSmog, that report lists the connections between the burning of fossil fuels, the elevation of CO2 in our atmosphere, and in the future changing of global average temperatures and global weather patterns. 1969. Ominous, prophetic. So the conclusion of this article is that Exxon understood the science way back then, and instead of using their resources to change business models, chose to fund a network of organizations to spread doubt and disinformation about climate change and slow down solutions, slow down the transition away from fossil fuels, which, according to another article I covered for you from Greenpeace, an expose they did with an Exxon lobbyist, to some degree or another is still happening to this day. And that is why we saw so much of the initial climate initiatives put out by the Biden administration, which were brought on by people, like us who are protesting and saying, hey, we want action, weakened in these final days of the infrastructure bill. So not just as this video I made for you, I put together for you, and that article I'm citing to you from DeSmog show us the real nature of our system. Why isn't all the media covering this story? Why not? And not just show us the influence and the power of these large corporations in our society. It shows us the nature of how our lives and our work is steered towards this consumerism. And it also, though, but really more importantly, what if that archive didn't exist? How would we even know about this? So, hey, I hope you found this video really helpful, entertaining. And until next time, please make sure you are subscribed to my channel. You click that notification bell. You're liking, you're commenting. And until next time, as always, peace be with you.